Listen close. Beneath polite society lies the old art of bending fate with cunning, not force. We will walk through the instruments of such bending, not to teach you how to harm, but to reveal them so you may defend yourself, protect what matters, and choose a different path. Perception is the realm, it is the unseen kingdom where reputations are forged. Verdicts are passed and fortunes are overturned without the clang of steel. To live in this realm is to understand that men and women do not act upon raw reality so much as upon the portrait of reality presented to them. A man may be innocent and yet be ruined because the portrait framed on the wall shows him guilty. A woman may be generous and yet be shunned because rumor paints her as avaricious. The court listens not to what happened, but to how the tale is told, and the ear is more easily pricked by cadence, color, and repetition than by stubborn, dry fact. This is why those who master outcomes first learn to master impressions. They treat the world as a stage, and every glance returned, every careless silence as a line in a play that must be delivered with precision. To guard one's standing, therefore, is first to recognize that silence is not neutral. Where there is silence, the mind invents. Idle gaps are hungry and will be filled by the most vivid and available thing. If you leave a space in which your actions and motives are unexplained, rumor will move in like a tenant. Without rent, it will redecorate your life with suspicion and hang on your walls its own tapestries of interpretation. The prudent do not rely on others to speak on their behalf. They craft small truths in public. Consistent facts placed like lanterns along a dark road so that travelers cannot be led astray by shadow. A timely, calm statement given with facts and names, an account offered to the right ears before a story gains weight, will shape the angle at which gossip strikes. It is not grand declarations but steady, measured deposits of clarity that starve rumor. Perception is manufactured in layers. There is the immediate image, how you enter a room, how you answer a question, whether your voice trembles. And then there is the narrative woven afterward, who repeats your words, how your gestures are described, which details are preserved and which are allowed to go missing. The work of those who would harm you is to tilt both layers at once, to catch an unguarded expression and to set that expression spinning into a tale that suits them. Those who survive such design learn to mind both the moment and the long view. They train themselves to answer immediately when misinterpretation is possible, to place witnesses where stories might begin, and to make public the very minutiae the deceiver would prefer to bury. They are not boastful, they are prepared. They understand that dignity must be paid for in vigilance. Do not mistake visibility for vanity. A man of principle who hides his virtues because he believes they should be self-evident is as foolish as a merchant who refuses to light his shop at night and then wonders why customers pass by. Visibility, when applied with discretion, is armor. It is a record kept in light so that darkness cannot later claim the space and invent crimes. Visibility means leaving traces that are factual and verifiable, messages time-stamped, witnesses present when necessary, decisions recorded in the voice and ink of others. It means shaping the narrative not with grand proclamations designed to dazzle, but with small, incontrovertible facts that accumulate until falsehoods founder beneath their weight. Yet the artisan of perception knows also the shape of humility. To surround oneself with light that blinds others is to invite envy. To call attention to every virtue is to seem to court praise. The skill is in calibration. Make the truth available without appearing to manufacture it. Make the facts obvious without seeming defensive. Make your character visible without seeming insufferably proud. The eye that measures perception must be both honest and tactical. Speak plainly when necessary. Remain silent where silence does not create a vacuum. Let your actions be witnessed more than your boasts be spoken. This balance is itself a performance, subtle and deliberate. Consider too the economy of small gestures. A single careless word can become a coin spent and spent again by those who traffic in scandal. A single kindly letter, left unmentioned, may be the shield that turns aside a rumor. Those who survive the realm of perception are economical with their exposures and lavish with their proofs. They do not hope for memory to serve them. They supply memory with evidence. They plant documents. They allow their allies to testify to the same small truths. They ensure that when someone says, "I heard," there is already a counterweight. You heard, but here is what was seen. They treat their reputation as they would treat a bridge, build it with strong materials and inspect it often. Finally, remember that perception cuts both ways. To shape how others see you is to shape how you see others. Beware the intoxicating effect of success that comes from cunning management of image alone. It tempts one to believe the portrait one has painted, and to assume control where none truly exists. A ruler who believes his facade is the thing itself will be exposed when reality, fickle and ungovernable, asserts itself. Thus the wise cultivate inner steadiness to match the public persona. Let your outward measures be anchored by inward truth, so that when the storm of misperception blows, your roots hold and your branches point the same direction as your heart. For perception is the realm, and to inhabit it without self-deception is the only way to rule it with integrity. The theater of alliances. Watch the stage and you will see that every actor is also a set piece, every smile a prop, every favor a thread in a web. Men and women do not stand alone, they stand in relation. Those relations can be the scaffolding of power or the trapdoor beneath a career. An alliance is not merely a pleasant arrangement of sympathies and shared interests. It is an instrument, a means of amplifying influence, redistributing risk, and shaping outcomes without the necessity of force. To understand alliances is to understand how influence travels. It moves not in straight lines but along chains, through favors reciprocated and debts remembered, through the quiet economy of obligations that men call friendship. Those who would preserve themselves or protect others must therefore rid alliances as if they were maps, for misreading a map is to walk into marshes. Observe how alliances are forged often quietly, with small tokens and private words. A meeting over wine, a timely compliment, a discreet help offered when no one is watching. These are the stitches that hold two lives together. They are not dramatic. Their power comes from being unremarked upon until they are needed. The clever build networks of such stitches so that when pressure arrives, it is received not by one lonely heart, but by a lattice of loyalties. Yet one must beware the illusion that all bonds are equal. Some are decorative, others structural. A compliment given publicly can be ephemeral. A deed done in secret and remembered can be a pillar. Read each alliance for its material. Who stood when it cost him? Who returned favors when the sun was high, and what does that suggest about what they will do when the night falls? Allies are not immutable. Time, interest, envy, and fear erode even the firmest ties. Those who would do you ill do not always bring swords. They instead tilt loyalties. They whisper doubts to those who stand beside you. They make small requests that accrue obligations in their favor. They create choices for your allies that quietly reward your absence. The slow realignment of loyalties is a preferred method of those who prefer to win without a fight. Withdraw a favor here, seed a doubt there, and watch how the architecture of support shifts. To guard against such erosion is to practice attention and gratitude as deliberate arts. Thank when thanks is due. Reciprocate promptly and proportionately. Make it clear that an ally's loss on your behalf is not an empty gesture, but a credit in a ledger. Do not allow your friends to subsidize you into penury of influence. Attend to the small balances before the accounts are irredeemable. There is also the danger of overreliance. An individual who believes himself unassailable because of alliances may discover, at the moment of greatest need, that the alliances are brittle. People will desert when the cost of staying becomes more than the cost of leaving. They will realign when opportunity offers them a sharer of greater fortunes. Thus prudence is exercised in diversifying support and in avoiding the tyranny of a single ally upon which fate depends. Cultivate many modest ties rather than a few grand ones. And when you benefit from another's influence, make visible the ways in which that influence is honored and reciprocated, so that others see the cost of betrayal before they choose it. Alliances are as much about appearance as about substance. Public knowledge of friendships and mutual obligations deters betrayal more effectively than private assurances. When the bonds are visible, when favors are known and mutualities acknowledged, the price of treachery rises. Those who would preserve themselves understand that transparency in the shape of reliable, public reciprocity is a form of deterrence. That is not to encourage ostentation. It is to suggest a measured display of connection, a quiet ledger kept where others may see that debts have been both incurred and repaid. Let it be known, without boast, that there are accounts between you and those who stand with you. Yet the theater of alliances contains darker machinery, the instrument of division. To fracture an opponent's support is to defeat him without striking. This knowledge is why those who serve justice or wish to protect themselves must learn the signals of erosion, the repeated small refusals, the slow distancing, the new confidences formed elsewhere. When one notices the beginning of a fracture, one cannot rely on hope alone. One must restore the reciprocal balance, ask plainly what has shifted, and, if deception is afoot, Ensure that the truth has been given room to breathe before rumor fills the space. Salvaging an alliance may require humility. Apologize where necessary, repay a long-forgotten kindness, or offer a modest act that demonstrates the constancy of your bond. These acts are not manipulative when intended to heal. They are the practical maintenance of human architecture. Finally, remember that alliances are moral tests as much as strategic assets. Those who build alliances by preying on others' weaknesses, or by promising what they cannot deliver, will find that their network is a brittle one. It contains men and women whose loyalty is contingent upon continuance of the con. A sturdier network arises from reliability, from the habit of doing what one says, from the willingness to stand when it is costly. In this way, alliances become not merely expedients but a reflection of character. Who you choose to stand with, and how you treat those who stand with you reveals more about your rule than any decree or speech ever could. To cultivate alliances honorably is to ensure they are not instruments of ruin, but bulwarks of mutual flourishing. Control the story. There is no instrument in the repertoire of power more decisive than the shaping of narrative. Facts exist in abundance, but facts without framing are like scattered stones. Only the mason who arranges them into a wall commands shelter. A rumor is merely an ember until it finds paper and wind. A truth unattended becomes indistinguishable from a lie. Those who understand this do not wait for the world to tell their tale. They place the first line themselves. They do not attempt to replace reality, but to select which parts will be seen first, which will be explained, and which will be allowed to remain background noise. To control the story is not to invent what never was. It is to choose the sequence and the light in which events will be perceived, and by so doing to tilt judgment in one direction rather than another. Begin with timing. The same fact, told at different hours, produces different outcomes. A prompt clarification after a misstep will often suffocate gossip before it grows legs. A delayed correction allows the imaginative to embroider the gap. Those who would shape perception understand the tyranny of the first report. The initial image lodges in memory, and subsequent corrections must climb a harder hill to dislodge it. Thus the keeper of narrative moves early and with calmer short, measured account placed before the rumor flight gathers strength, an anchor thrown to halt the tumble of speculation. Timing is not frantic. Frantic corrections reveal panic, but it is not indifferent either. It is the gentle, preemptive illumination of a lantern before the shadows gather. Next, attend to witnesses and channels. A story told once by a private hand is vulnerable. The same story corroborated by witnesses, documents, and reputable channels acquires weight. Those who compose narratives plant corroboration like stakes in the ground. They choose the medium. Letters, public statements, trusted intermediaries, most likely to carry authority to the intended audience. They are mindful of who speaks. A sober voice heard through official channels carries more force than any spontaneous outcry, and they consider amplification, which voices will echo the account without distortion, and which will twist it to suit their own ends. Control is therefore both the assertion of a line and the orchestration of its chorus. Language is the artisan's tool. Words can clarify or they can inflame. Those who master stories choose words that close doors to misinterpretation rather than opening them. They avoid hyperbole that invites skepticism, and they abstain from language so florid that it becomes a spectacle and loses credibility. Instead, they prefer precise nouns, dates, and references, a tone that reads as steadiness rather than pleading. The formality of a clear record, names, times, places, creates a grammar that rumor finds difficult to bend. Conversely, those who rely on metaphor and outrage hand the stage to dramatists. The public prefers a sober ledger to a theatrical performance when deciding whom to trust. Silence, too, is a rhetorical choice that must be made with care. There are moments when silence preserves dignity and moments when silence is the seedbed of fiction. The wise decide by understanding the likely occupant of that silence. Will silence be thought integrity, or will it be thought evasion? Where silence invites story, one must either remove the temptation by speaking or shape the silence by announcing its reason. An announced pause, "I will address this when the facts are assembled," is less damaging than an unexplained absence of comment. Silence must be intentional, not accidental. Otherwise, the storyteller with the sharpest quill will fill the void with a tale that suits him. A subtle but crucial element of story control is the management of detail. Not every truth requires equal prominence. Some facts, harmless in themselves, become torches when paired with insinuations. The prudent editor of one's life places the most useful truths forward, those that preempt the predictable misreadings, and relegates trivialities to a context where they cannot be twisted. This is not deceit, it is stewardship. It is the same care a gardener takes in pruning. Remove the shoots that would overburden the tree. Allow the fruit to ripen in view. When one cannot preempt misinterpretation, one supplies context that makes distortion laborious. There is also a need to anticipate counter-narratives. No story exists in isolation. For every account offered, there is often an alternative waiting to be voiced. The strategist prepares responses not merely to the most likely distortions, but to the cleverest. To be ready is to have rebuttals framed before they are required, to have witnesses prepared to speak to the particulars, and to have documentary traces ordered and visible. The best defense is not only to tell one's story, but to anticipate the story the adversary would wish told, and to make that story less plausible by presenting a fuller, more persuasive account first. Trustworthiness accumulates and can be spent. Control of story is easier for those who have established credibility over time. Their words are given the benefit of the doubt. Therefore, the long practice of truthfulness and measured speech is itself an investment in future narrative battles. Do not suppose that last-minute candor will erase years of carelessness. Reputation is a bank account from which narrative authority is withdrawn. It is replenished by consistent, honest record, keeping and secured by the habitual truth of one's actions. Yet power that derives solely from control of story can become brittle if divorced from reality. The art lies not in creating an elaborate fiction, but in harmonizing account with action so that when scrutiny penetrates the tale, it finds substance rather than empty decoration. The craftsman of stories who loses sight of the underlying facts must rely on ever more elaborate defenses. The resulting strain invites exposure. Thus, narrative mastery must be matched by integrity. Let your framed portrait be an accurate likeness, not a painted mask. Finally, remember that to control a story is to assume responsibility for its consequences. A narrative shapes decisions and destinies. It can protect but also wound. Those who practice this craft without regard for the human cost become architects of ruin. To learn the mechanics of story control is to learn the power to do harm. To frame this knowledge responsibly is to accept the duty to use it to prevent harm, to correct falsehood, and to preserve the truth where it matters most. Invisible pressure. It is the art of bending the will without appearing to touch it, of forcing a decision without ever uttering a command. It is not the shout in the council chamber, but the stillness that follows when every listener has understood what will happen if they disobey. Power that relies on open coercion is crude, fragile, and costly. It provokes resistance and records itself in memory. But pressure that remains unseen leaves no trace, only a series of choices that all seem voluntary until one notices that every available path leads to the same gate. Those who move society's courts and institutions from the shadows understand this principle. People must feel free even as they are guided. The illusion of autonomy is the most efficient form of control. When men believe they are acting on their own judgment, they will defend their servitude as though it were liberty. Invisible pressure operates first through structure. Build the walls of a labyrinth, and you need not chase the mouse inside it. Its options have already been decided. So it is with organizations, laws, and customs. A policy written in gentle language, a form that requires 15 approvals, a tradition that discourages dissent. These shape behavior without the need for threats. The governed obey because the environment channels them toward obedience. The wise observer recognizes that many acts of compliance are the consequence not of fear but of architecture. To resist such structures requires imagination, the ability to see that what is presented as necessity is in fact design. The subtler instrument is dependence. When one's livelihood, reputation, or comfort depends upon a favor, there is little need for commands. The debtor anticipates the wishes of his benefactor and performs them before being asked. Gratitude, when unbalanced, becomes a leash of silk. It does not burn, it does not chafe, but it holds. Those who would protect their independence must be cautious in accepting generosity that binds them. To be perpetually obliged is to live inside an invisible cage where the bars are built from one's own sense of debt. The only reliable antidote is mutuality, to return favors swiftly, to keep the ledger clear, to accept kindness as transaction rather than tribute. Social exclusion is another invisible instrument. Men are herd creatures. The cold edge of ostracism wounds more deeply than the lash. The subtle ruler need not punish a dissenter. It is enough to ensure his invitations cease. His name fades from conversation. His successes go unmentioned. The silence of peers becomes his prison. Those who master invisible pressure understand that belonging is a currency more valuable than coin, and they control access to it. To preserve oneself in such a world, one must cultivate inner worth that does not depend on applause, to draw esteem from conscience rather than crowd, to maintain a private fellowship of the trustworthy rather than the popular. Delay, too, is a form of domination. To postpone decisions, to defer signatures, to promise review while doing nothing. These tactics exhaust the petitioner until he relinquishes what he sought. Bureaucracy is an empire built entirely on delay. Its soldiers are forms, its weapons are requirements that multiply like hydra heads. A person entangled in such systems finds that energy drains faster than hope, and surrender begins to look like peace. Those who design such labyrinths need never say no. They simply ensure that yes never arrives. The defensive art here is persistence paired with documentation. Every unanswered letter, every postponed meeting becomes a record of obstruction, and records, unlike whispers, can one day speak loudly. There is a psychological species of invisible pressure that thrives on uncertainty. The unspoken threat is more terrifying than the declared one, because it recruits imagination as an accomplice. When a superior frowns but does not specify why, when a friend grows distant without explanation, the mind begins to write its own indictment. Anxiety fills the void left by vagueness. Those who wield power understand that fear of what might happen is more pliant than knowledge of what will. To resist such manipulation, one must cultivate composure, the discipline of not supplying the missing threat with one's own invention. Wait for clarity, do not confess to crimes never named. Another device is scarcity. By limiting access to information, to opportunity, to affection, the manipulator ensures that what he offers appears indispensable. Those who live beneath such scarcity will compromise their principles for the smallest token of approval or resource. The economy of dependence is cruel precisely because it teaches desperation. To escape it, one must diversify sources of security, to plant many roots so that when one soil dries, another still feeds. Self-reliance, not arrogance, is the foundation of freedom under invisible pressure. Invisible pressure also operates through reputation. When gossip and insinuation are permitted to circulate unchecked, the victim begins to self-censor, to move cautiously, to explain what no one has yet accused him of. This is victory for the unseen hand the target polices himself. To counter this, a man must refuse to negotiate with shadows. He must act with consistent integrity, so that each attempt to stain his name contradicts a long record of conduct. Consistency is the one antidote rumor cannot digest. It forces even enemies to admit the weight of pattern against the flicker of allegation. Finally, there is the pressure of affection, the softest and most dangerous of all. Love, admiration, respect. These can become levers when one's hunger for them exceeds one's prudence. To be loved is sweet, to need love at any price is ruinous. Those who wish to steer another quietly need only withdraw warmth in measured intervals. The victim will correct himself eagerly, guessing at the behavior that might restore favor. To preserve liberty, affection must be received as grace, not as rations dispensed from a higher table. The heart that keeps its own counsel cannot be blackmailed by tenderness. Invisible pressure governs more realms than armies ever will. It exists wherever compliance is achieved without command, wherever people reshape themselves to fit the invisible mold. To see it clearly is to reclaim the will that others try to rent. To recognize its operation is to step outside the current that carries so many unknowing souls toward the same predetermined sure moral bankruptcy. It begins not with grand betrayals, but with small compromises that whisper instead of shout. A man tells himself that a lie will serve the greater good, that a betrayal is merely strategy, that cruelty is only firmness by another name. One concession begets another until conscience becomes an accountant, measuring right and wrong by utility alone. The spirit erodes quietly, like metal corroding under paint, unseen until the structure buckles. To pursue advantage at any cost is to mortgage the soul, and though the world may not demand immediate payment, the debt accrues interest in silence. Those who trade integrity for control discover too late that the purchase is temporary while the loss is permanent. Moral bankruptcy is not visible in the face. It manifests in the eyes that no longer meet others honestly, in the gestures that grow mechanical, in laughter that feels rehearsed. The bankrupt soul continues to act, to scheme, to speak with eloquence, but its words have lost the weight that truth lends. Deception becomes habit, and habit becomes nature. The individual begins to live in compartments, the mind calculating, the heart anesthetized, the tongue fluent in justification. He convinces himself that he is not corrupt but realistic, that he has simply adapted to the harsh climate of the world. In this way, the decay becomes invisible even to its host, who mistakes numbness for maturity. Those who live by manipulation often imagine themselves unassailable because they move unseen, striking through influence rather than confrontation. Yet with each maneuver, something vital diminishes. Compassion, once a reflex, must now be recalled as theory. Loyalty, once a principle, becomes a currency. The manipulator's world contracts until every relationship is measured by potential yield. Friendship turns into a negotiation, love into an investment, kindness into strategy. The world mirrors his own heart, cold, transactional, efficient, and he cannot understand why joy no longer visits. He has achieved control, yet control has become a prison. The morally bankrupt man does not wake one morning to guilt, he wakes to emptiness. The applause that once satisfied now sounds hollow, because it praises an illusion. The rewards of cunning bring no rest, only the fear of being outmaneuvered. Suspicion replaces peace, for he knows how easily trust can be broken. He has done it himself. Every ally is a potential rival, every admirer a possible deceiver. The punishment of moral bankruptcy is perpetual vigilance, a mind that cannot sleep, because it knows the currency in which it has traded. In the realm of politics, commerce, or power, moral bankruptcy often masquerades as genius. The tactician who wins without scruple is praised for his effectiveness. The strategist whose silence his conscience is admired for his clarity. But the admiration of others cannot refill an emptied vessel. Over time, the bankrupt's very victories turn to ash, for each success achieved through deceit demands maintenance through greater deceit. The edifice must be constantly patched with new lies, and the strain of maintaining them consumes creativity, empathy, and finally sanity. The individual becomes what he feared most: predictable, for his choices are always dictated by expedience. The corruption of moral sense breeds a peculiar loneliness. The bankrupt cannot trust affection, because he knows how easily affection can be manipulated. Every act of loyalty directed toward him is suspect, every gesture of friendship interpreted as strategy. He begins to long for sincerity even as he undermines it. The laughter of honest men irritates him, for it reminds him of a freedom he traded away. Thus isolation becomes the inevitable companion of corruption. The crowd may surround him, but none can reach him through the armor of his own suspicion. In institutions, moral bankruptcy multiplies. A single compromised leader teaches others that conscience is a luxury, and soon the infection spreads. Rules become substitutes for morality, appearances replace integrity, and the institution survives only as a machine that mimics virtue. Orders are followed not because they are right, but because they are required. The language of principle remains, but its words are hollowed out, like shells from which the life has been extracted. When entire hierarchies reach this stage, the collective conscience of a nation or company becomes a ghost, haunting the very structures it once animated. The tragedy of moral bankruptcy lies in its efficiency. It works. Lies do secure advantage, cruelty does command obedience, and manipulation does bend outcomes. The immediate world rewards such acts because results are visible and virtue is not. But what cannot be measured is the corrosion within, the dulling of insight, the loss of empathy, the fatigue of constant disguise. The moral sense, once extinguished, takes with it the joy of achievement, leaving only appetite. Success ceases to be meaningful when stripped of moral resonance. It becomes a mechanical addiction to winning. The path toward this ruin is rarely chosen outright. It is slid into by degrees. The first deception may feel justified, the second necessary, the third habitual. Each step taken without reflection strengthens the belief that ethics are ornamental, that morality is for the weak. Soon the man cannot recall when he last acted out of conviction rather than calculation. He begins to believe his own fictions because they are more comfortable than the truth. The self becomes divided, the outward persona thriving, the inward self decaying in silence. Moral bankruptcy also distorts perception of others. The corrupt man cannot comprehend innocence except as ignorance. When he meets honesty, he calls it naivety. When he sees sacrifice, he labels it performance. His vision is tinted by his own decay, and thus he perpetuates the cycle by spreading cynicism. Every word he speaks carries the weight of his disbelief in goodness. Those who once admired him begin to imitate his detachment, mistaking it for wisdom. The contagion of moral exhaustion passes from master to disciple until entire generations forget that integrity was once a strength, not a liability. To understand moral bankruptcy, one must see it as a poverty of meaning rather than merely of virtue. The bankrupt may own wealth, command obedience, inspire fear, Yet he is impoverished in the one currency that grants peace, the knowledge that one's actions correspond to one's values. Without that correspondence, all achievements feel counterfeit. The applause of others becomes unbearable because it celebrates a mask, not a man. He may stand at the summit of influence and yet sense that beneath his feet there is only air.